How's everybody doing tonight? Doing great, doing great. So, Brother Philip said something Sunday about the New York Times, about a guy showing up. Well, that dude ain't showed up yet, so he had to choose me to come up here and do this. And I listen, guys. I speak a lot and talk a lot.
I can't hear you.
Yes, they can. So the only time I really get to talk and everything is around at the jail and everything, and do the jail ministry. And I thought maybe somebody other than Stacy would wear some orange or something tonight, so that I would feel comfortable about being around a bunch of folks, because that's the only way. I mean, I feel comfortable around those guys and everything. But listen, those guys are really honest about a lot of things, and we get to share with them. And Brother Bud, Miss Betty, we all, and several other ladies in here that join in and get to do this ministry. It's been a blessing to us and everything. We always run across a snag, though. We ran across one last night. They wouldn't let us go in and see our trustees. They've changed them to a name called inmates. What's the difference? But they wouldn't let us go in there and see them. Doesn't make any sense, but we'll get to the bottom of it and everything. So, Brother Bud, would you open this up in prayer, please, sir? So what I'd like to do is kind of do like we do at the jail ministry and everything, and get you guys involved as much as possible, and maybe get a little feedback and talk back and everything. But, the chain of events has been going on just the last week or so here in the United States has been crazy. Would you not agree? It's been something. But we've seen how God's hand has turned something in tragic into something really good. And I think the last account I had that they've opened up 37,000 new chapters here in the United States at colleges, Christian chapters that are following behind Charlie Kirk's way of teaching and talking and everything like that. And the whole thing was that he wanted to have a conversation, something similar to what we're going to do tonight. It's just talk and everything. So I just want to ask a question, maybe a couple of them, whatever. But have you ever had a hard time with somebody, forgiving somebody that's been in your life? I mean, a really hard time that it is really, has hurt you so tremendously, but you've had a hard time forgiving them. And anybody? Is there anybody that would like to tell me of a story that maybe is going on now, or something that's happened in the past life, or the past time? We understand, John. Okay. Some of them are very delicate, but maybe there's somebody here would share a little bit. Anybody? Ooh. Yeah, y'all not like the jail ministry. Okay, there we go. Come on up here.
This happened several years ago. Me and a close friend of mine we got crossed up over politics, something that really didn't matter. And we didn't speak to each other for 3 or 4 years. And this began to bear pretty heavy on me. And I had what I call so much pride that I refused to go
And listen, Mr. Bud always chimes in on the ministry and everything. He does a great job, and he does. I need his help always, and I'm going to need it more. So here we go. Anybody else? Anybody else that would like to just share something? Okay, sure. Wow. Wow. Right. You know, that's some good stuff. Anybody else? Come on, just one more. Anybody?
Well, I've got a situation right now, probably some of you may have had it. Right now on Facebook, I have a cousin, which, I love my cousin, but he's an anti-Charlie Kirk fan.
Right.
He's as anti-Charlie Kirk as he can be. And he keeps putting on these Facebook things, and that just, I can feel myself getting angry because a lot of the stuff he's saying, I don't believe one bit of that.
Right.
Where he's getting his information, because we know a lot of information is false information.
Excellent.
And I think he's getting information that's false, so it's really been hard, but I try to just think now, you can let your anger get the best of you, and that's not the way to go with this. So every time I get, he'll have a post, I'll just say, Lord, help me know how to respond to this in the right way and not just let it be, negative and harsh and ugly. You can't respond to them the way they respond. You have to be reasonable, reasonable sometimes, and they're not always reasonable in what they say.
It's hard to forgive sometimes, isn't it? It really is. And does everybody agree with that? It's really a hard thing to forgive. And it's because we're human, I guess, and we struggle with that. We have a hard time with it. You got anything to add? Okay, you sure?
Don't get on Meg's bad.
Well, listen, it's hard to forgive and everything, but I want to tell you a story tonight that a true story about a family, and the name of the two people is Chris Williams and Curtis Wright. Chris Williams had a family, a wonderful family, and they were together. He had three boys and one daughter. So they were all out on a family night and had, I guess, gone to a ball game or something or whatever, and they were coming back, and a drunk driver hit them, killed his wife, and she was pregnant, killed his daughter, Annie, and killed Ben, and had another son in the car with his name Sam, and he lived. And he knew immediately when that car crash happened that his family was dead right there next to him. And he seen this car flipped upside down and this person getting out of this car walking away just in a daze. His son, Sam, sustained really bad brain injury to the point that he had to go to rehab and a lot of expense and everything. And the dad was extremely angry, extremely, just you can imagine the emotions of losing your family, of hurting. And he goes on to say that he had to deal with a lot of things. And you can imagine now, if you'd lost your family and your mother and daddy and everybody around you, especially his, were on him that he should sue this family because they had lots of money and they should pay for this debt that this boy had done to him. This boy was 17 years old, like 2 months being 18 years old, and could be tried as an adult. And to go a little bit further here and everything, that he goes through all these emotions and different things throughout, and everybody's telling the bills are coming in from the doctor bills, and they're just adding up. His insurance on this car accident says that they won't cover it, and now he is up debt to his eyeballs. He was in a bad situation. Every way that he turned, he was running into a bad situation. And he kept going back to it, and what I didn't understand to begin with was this man had had things happen in his life, and he had become a pastor. Not only a pastor, but he worked a side job, and it literally showed him going to work one day. And I can't imagine being like he was, but he shaved one side of his face and didn't shave the other side. That's just how distraught he was. I mean, he was in a bad way. And they let it ride because they knew the situation and everything. But it goes on that he has an older son that wasn't in the wreck and everything, and he's also extremely mad at Dad because he wants to see him get angry. Now, I'm thinking this pastor, he's thinking about, I should forgive this kid, or maybe something like that going on. But as the show goes on and everything, that he has to go to trial with this boy, and he sees him for the first time. This juvenile's been locked up ever since he's had the wreck, and his mother and dad's here behind him, and he's sitting over here. He's the one. And he goes in with the state attorney to begin with, and the state attorney says, listen, you haven't got to worry about this thing. We're going to take this case over, and we're going to push for the maximum thing that he's going to be tried as an adult. You hadn't got to do anything. We're going to do it. And believe it or not, that's just the way the state works. If something happens in your life, they take it over. They don't give you a choice. They tell you what they're going to do because they're out for blood. They're out for everything that they can get. Well, it goes on to show that during the first part of the trial and everything, they get up there and they show up all the gory pictures and the bad things that they can hammer down on this boy and everything. And it's just bad. It's just, you're thinking, the prosecutor told the judge, said, listen, it's as bad as this boy took a gun out and came out and shot these people, but instead, he was drinking that night and made the choice of drinking and used a vehicle to kill these people. And he should spend 30 years at least in jail. And that was the minimum of an adult serving for that kind of a crime. Well, it goes on that everything goes on that he's struggling to deal with this thing and everything. And they get up there at the next trial, at the next time they got together with the trial, and they sit there, and again, the prosecutor gets up and tells them, listen, this kid's been 17 years old, but he done everything as an adult. He knows what he's doing. He should be tried as an adult. The defendant gets up there and he says, listen, this kid made one mistake, one time, but yet he's going to pay for it for the rest of his life. He said he shouldn't do that. He should be only tried as a juvenile and everything. Now, take just a second. What would you do? Where would you be at in this thing? Anybody? Say that again now. Take a position. What if you were the dad? You want everything to match, right? So, and you know, it's hard not to want that. Everybody would want that. I mean, they just killed your family. He just killed my children, my wife. I want that revenge. I want that. So in that second part of that trial, the judge heard the evidence, and he said, he stepped back and he said, I've got to hear one more piece of evidence here. And he said, I need to ask Mr. Williams what he thinks, how this boy should be judged. What is his opinion? And he stood up and he said, Your Honor, that's not my decision. It's yours. He said, but I will tell you this. He said, no matter what you decide, that boy is going to spend the rest of his life in torment and pain and hurting. He's already paying for what he's already done. And he said, I want to see the best for Curtis. Well, his family's in the courtroom, kind of like you guys are, and they're stunned at what this man has just said. Because the judge walked out, come back, and rendered his decision and tried him as a juvenile. 3 years in jail, and his record expunged. Means it cleared it off for killing that family. Now, that's a hard thing to forgive. Now, had he forgiven him, he was still hurting the pain and everything. He goes back to the house, and his oldest son says, I wished that it would have been you, that mother would have been driving it, and you would have been in the passenger seat, and she would have still been here. Because that's not the decision. You're not fighting for us. You don't care nothing about us. And storms out the house. And he comes back in, and the boy doesn't come back in home until 4 o'clock the next morning. Okay? And his dad's sitting up waiting for him. And he said, son, he said, where you been? He said, Dad, I just been walking. He said, it just helps me kind of get things off my mind. He said, it just had to walk and get out of here. And he said, go wake your son, go wake your brother up. He said, I want you guys to go take a ride with me. So he goes, wakes his younger brother up. Young shows him in the back seat, and he's asleep, laying there and everything. And they go to a hillside, a beautiful hillside. And it's a mountain coming over, and it's a beautiful lake down there, and they're overlooking it, and the sun's just breaking over. And he said, guys, this is a spot that I always take your mother to. We enjoy this place right here. I just want you to bring here. I want you to see it. And he gets that out of his mouth, and he says, I want to tell you about an accident. And the boy says, Dad, I'm sick of this. I'm tired of hearing about this accident. He said, no, son. He said, not that accident. He said, it's an accident that happened 30 years ago. He said, I was coming home from work. He says, I was about your age or a little bit older. And he said, I was coming home, and there was a thump up under my truck. He said, I stopped, and he said, I seen an older boy standing there with a baseball. And I said, I go up to him and I said, son, are you okay? He said, yes, I'm fine. And then all of a sudden, ambulances and police cars and stuff started showing up because he couldn't see anything. He didn't know what was going on. But what had happened, the neighbors had seen the whole thing. The oldest boy had chased his younger brother out in the street. And he had hit Chris, now the pastor, had hit this boy. And he was up underneath the fender wheel. And they had to get him out. A few days later, the boy died. And he's sitting there telling his son that. And he said, and this is what I got to show you. And it was a letter from the mother. And the letter went on to say, Chris, I want to tell you that we made the decision because of what had happened to our son, that he was in such bad hurt and how he was hurt so bad that we had to cut off life support. And it was just a way that God's timing is what he wanted to do. God had to take him home. She said, but I want you to know I'm a Christian and I forgive you. I don't want you to carry this anymore. No more burden on you. I want you to just let it go. Just forget it. Because I want you to move on and do well. And I assumed from that point on, Chris decided to give his life to God, that he'd really dedicated himself, and he wanted to become a pastor and help other people. Well, so all of that happened, and the boy, the oldest boy now that was so mad at his dad goes that, Dad, I had no idea that this had ever happened. He said, yeah. He said, matter of fact, 30 years ago to this date is when it happened. Now listen, this boy could have got 30 years to this date. Now, you know, forgiveness is a lot of things, and it can go very deep, you know, in a lot of different ways. But think about this. Think about how God works, how you've seen him work this week in different things. But the story doesn't end there with all that. Chris goes back, and he gets up, and he's laying there back at the house, and the phone rings. And it's Curtis. And one of the ladies from the prison had called and said, Curtis wants to meet you. And now Chris, you can imagine now, he hadn't talked to this boy dead on, straight on. He has not had a chance to say anything to him. But he goes on to say that he goes into prison, he goes in there and talks to him. And this lady, it's kind of a therapy to help Curtis get through, because he's having a lot of problems too. He's toting a lot of things. Now you can imagine, Chris had run over and killed a child that he didn't mean to do 30 years ago, and he's been toting that. Even though he's been forgiven, he still knows it's there. And he goes on to tell that Curtis asked him, said, he had some questions for him. And the first couple of questions was, I want to know about Michelle. What kind of person was she? Tell me about Ben. Tell me about Anna. He wanted to know about their lives, the people that he'd killed. And he went on to say that, how can you forgive me? How can someone like you forgive me? Strangest thing Chris said, I can't. It's a hard thing to do. And it wasn't me. It was God. God's grace that done it. And he said, that's something I want you to know about. He said, Curtis, he said, you just got to let it go. He said, you've just got to let this thing go. what forgiveness does, it not only releases the person you're forgiven, but it releases you too. It gives you that chance to forgiveness to get it off your chest and everything. It goes on to show right before this, Chris walks out of the jailhouse. He takes that boy's hand and he shakes it. And he said, listen, the only thing I'd ask for you to do is if you can just tell somebody about your story. Just tell somebody. Well, it goes on to show at the end of the show that Chris got remarried. He married a widow, and they had 2 more children. And that Curtis went on to prison. He served his time in jail, and he got out, and he told tens of thousands of people, students at college and at schools, about his story about being a drunk driver. Now, there's so many things to take out of this story, that how God can use something so awful in our lives, so bad that we don't want to forgive it. We want to be resentful about it and hate it to the point that God can't take and bless us what else he had. Do you see that this man got restored? And listen, I told you about he owed a bunch of money on these medical bills. The state come in and paid for them. They had a fund and paid everything he had, just out of the blue. You know, it's only God. It's only God that can do stuff like that. When you think that you're up against the wall and everything is against you, you know, God shows up and shows out. And I think about the true thing behind all this for each and every one of us is how many times has God forgiven us? That he sent his son to die on the cross for us. These people died in real life that we can hear here on earth and talk about. But when we talk about Jesus, it's sometimes that we can't connect to that. But Jesus died on the cross for us. He gave it all. And by God's grace, we are saved through that. Jesus paid a debt that we didn't know. You know, Chris could have been 30 years in jail. He could have paid a debt, you know. Every one of them. It's just an amazing story of how God intervenes with families and stuff. So I'm going to ask you tonight, if you've got something that you need to forgive or forgive somebody or have resentment against, anything that could be going on, I'm going to read you something. This is out of Mark, chapter 11, verses 25 through 26. It's just a couple of verses. And this is what it says. Whenever you stand and pray, if you have anything against anyone, forgive them, that your Father in heaven may also forgive you of your trespasses. But, listen to this, but, and this is Jesus talking, it's in red, so it's pretty important stuff. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father in heaven forgive your trespasses. Wow. You can look at this one particular story of how all this happened, that it could have been awful. He could have said, I want to try him as an adult, and wasted this boy's 30 years. But instead, this boy come out and told his story to so many other kids and people that could have been drunk drivers who got hurt. So, forgiveness is a hard thing sometimes. Anybody else got anything they'd like to add? Something? Don't everybody talk, because at one time you could. Brother Philip told me not to go long, and I'm always a long talker, but okay. Miss Betty, would you like to close us in prayer? Yes.
Lord, as Sherry says, he sought you and you answered. Lord, we know that when we seek you, you will answer. And I thank you. Thank you for this devotion. Thank you for this time together. And as we pray for those that need to touch us in this time, Lord, I pray that you will be with us, that you will give you guide and direct, and we'll make no mistakes. For we ask this in your precious name.
Now, I'm going to kind of do like Brother Philip. Is there any prayer requests before we leave out here tonight? Anybody got any prayer requests? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Now, who is that again? Yes, yes. Okay.
Oh, Denny got a good report from the doctor yesterday, and they even took some of the staples out. But he said very weak, but he did get a good report.
Now, who is this then? Okay, okay, great, 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 great. Yep.
Laura Nixon had told me she has her sister Amy West
Uh-huh.
has a grandson, Rory West, that started having seizures and he's in Grand Madison.
Oh.
He died about 4 years ago.
Would somebody like to pray for those three right there? Would somebody? Sure. Any more prayer requests?
Just before I left the house, I saw a news flash where this town in Pennsylvania out there had a shooting and 5 of their policemen had been shot. 3 of them are dead and 2 are in critical condition. A small police force that wipes out a big force when these shootings occur.
We pray for Brother Phillip's family and for Brother Randy again. Just a safe travel, good, just a positive outcome to it.
Yeah, them four are not always in the best health, are they?
Also Shannon Brown, she was supposed to get pronounced today, but she didn't have some complications.
Anybody else? You got unspoken? Spoken? Anyone else?
You might remember Bailey Cooper. She had surgery on her spine, and she's been in a great deal of pain. And in addition to the pain of the surgery, she's having migraine headaches. So she's been getting a lot of pain medicine, but she's in a lot of pain. And hopefully she can come home tomorrow. But anyway, it's hard being in this pain. So just remember her.
Lori, would you lead us in prayer on that one, please, ma'am?
Working with Brother Dixon and Randy
wanted to tell y'all something, that, and this sounds a little crazy, but it actually happened in a chain of events that it did. So Charlie Kirk got killed, and we all know that. We all watched that. I've seen so many different videos. But for people like me, it inspired me because of what he stood for and how he spoke up for Christianity and talked to people, how he interacted with folks, not rude or upset or just wanted to have a conversation. And I thought, God, just give me an opportunity to talk. Just give me an opportunity to get in front of people, talk. I don't care where or what. Just give me that opportunity. And I never have had that bad of a problem, but I'm usually just one or two people, not a crowd like this and everything. But I prayed that prayer and everything and never thought nothing about it. And I get here on Friday, and Brother Philip kind of conjures me up, and he asked me, would I be interested in doing it? And I thought, well, no, wait a minute. And I was thinking in my mind, but yes, I just told God I'd do this. And I said, well, yeah, I'll do it. I'll step out here and do it. And it makes you nervous and everything. But it's just, again, the chain of events in your life that God, if you ask for it, be careful what you ask for, because, it may just happen. It may be something you want, may not. But listen, never forget, again, tonight we talked about forgiveness. The chain of events just in it, that you forgive someone. You may not see what they do in the future to forgive someone again because of the same thing and how it affects the next person. And it relieves you. It gets it off. But, thank God that Jesus came to that cross and died for every one of our sins, and that we're forgiven. And that's something we should remember when we're having a hard time forgiving somebody else. How many times has he forgiven us for what we've done? I'm going to end this in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, just thank you for this night. Thank you for these folks just showing up here and listening, Father. Thank you for giving me the words and helping me, Father, and just being with me and comforting me. God, just direct our steps. Help us to be bold in our faith. Help us not to back down, but to mention you and talk about you wherever we have a chance. Let us not be afraid. Let us speak up. Be with each and every one of us as we leave here tonight. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen.